Thanks, everyone. I want to say I'm very excited for our panel discussion today. We have some really incredible panelists joining us. And really the focus of today's panel is to think about, okay, the OCP is planning until 2050. How do we plan ahead for 25 years? And I want to bring us back a little bit to the first day that we gathered, where Elder Jackie Gonzalez opened up the assembly for us and for our panelists. She joined and she spoke a lot about, which is a worldview that's common amongst many Indigenous communities, is this idea of planning for 7 generations. And I think this assembly is an incredible opportunity for us to start thinking in that way. You know, this OCP has a timeline of until 2050. And so as we start to think about, you know, how do we craft our recommendations? What are the issues we're really interested in? I think it's adding that element of, okay, how do we plan then for 2050? And I think this afternoon also was a really great moment for us to start to vision, you know, what does that look like? What does that feel like? So I think that's going to be the focus of our panel today. I want to take a moment to introduce everyone before we dive into the questions and the commentary. So first we have Andy Yan, who's the director of the C program and associate professor of professional practice at Simon Fraser University's Urban Studies program. We have Erica Lay, who you just met, who's the manager of climate action and energy at the city of Burnaby. We have Graham Cavanaugh, who is a senior planner, new mobility, strategic planning and policy at TransLink. And then we have Paul Holden, who's the president of the Burnaby Board of Trade. So as we begin, I want to start us off in that place. And I've asked each of the panelists to kind of share with you folks 3 big ideas for the next 25 years of Burnaby. And these are going to focus on the kinds of trends that will influence how we think about and talk about the OCP. These are things that are going to put a strain on Burnaby, but also things that are opportunities for us to consider as we plan for the next 25 years. So I'm going to ask Andy to go up first, and Andy has a couple slides for us that he's going to share.
Well, thank you so much. Are we good? Hello, testing 1, 2. All right, we're live. All right, so thank you so much. And I think that what I wanted to do was kind of just give you a framework of what to perhaps expect for the future, at least the best way we can, I think, come about to understanding the future. And I think that what I did was just kind of bring together a understanding of just framing Burnaby, understanding what you're working from a kind of a data perspective, at least from the kind of perspectives we have towards population projection, towards employment, and really what we have as as our best estimate. That I think that some of these numbers may differ from the ones that are in your respective packages, just simply because of the kind of diverse ways we have of creating projections. But yet, I think they give an overall, if you will, direction towards where Burnaby is changing and how that change might look like. I think that from that perspective, it goes into really how in Burnaby you're working with a municipality that's 91 square kilometers, which is about 3% of the area of metropolitan Vancouver, and a population, at least in 2021, that's 250,000 people. That I think that it's kind of working from that initial base. You also begin to understand how extraordinary the growth has been in the last 100 years, that this is 100 years of population growth. I wanted to kind of give you a relativity in terms of like, how does Burnaby, say, compare to Richmond? And you kind of see just how that growth has occurred, which is sizable for both municipalities. But then in the case of Burnaby, you can kind of see just really how much that population has grown in the last 100 years, from 13,000 people to that 250,000 people. So I think that's a really, I think, profound amount of growth. But yet at the same time, how does that growth occur, and how might that growth look like into the future? And I think that really is a key part of my presentation, because the idea is perhaps the past is not prologue when we think about the future in British Columbia, in Canada, in the world. So that I think Burnaby is also similarly part of that trend. And I think that when you move into that discussion, it's kind of how we look at the challenges 30 years ahead. This is coming from the regional growth strategy in terms of the Metro Vancouver 2050 plan, and how does a municipality fit in 99,000 new additional residents into 2050, perhaps 53,000 new dwellings. And again, this can change, but then also employment, about almost 44,000 new jobs, and how that might be expressed, and how the kind of back and forth with industry, with the various stakeholders, with yourselves, how that might look like, and the kind of directions you might want to move your municipality and your homes to. And it's from this element you go into the question of really how that is a back and forth in terms of possibly up or down by 15%. But then I also important to kind of open it up with this, that projections are not necessarily predictions, that this is really, I think, something that I think goes into informing decisions, and yet also understanding that there is a flexibility, that life happens, and that as life happens in terms of economics, in terms of certainly events like COVID, that you do have events changing how numbers can occur over time. But that when we talk about really the population for Burnaby, we've certainly seen really that growth again, certainly in that recent time. This is working off of BC statistics, BC stats, in terms of really how growth is both occurred from 2001 to 2023, and yet at the same time projected in the future, at least to 2046, which was their time horizon, the 4 years off of the time horizon that you're working with. But I think you still generally get a understanding of what that might involve. But I think it's not only, say, just raw numbers. And I think that it's really important to not only focus on just raw numbers of people, but I think the bigger issue, and I think it's really important to understand who that might be. What is that population? Where might that land towards housing, towards recreation, towards amenities? And I think that the rest of my presentation is going into not necessarily how many, but who that population could be. And so from that perspective, it's really how in the previous 22 years, you've grown by 77,000 people, that in the next 23 years, you're looking at an increase of 112,000 people. So coming in from that perspective, you go in and think about how that population might look like in terms of age. And you really see how the components of that population will change, and that elements like the population under the age of 18 will increase by 30%. The total population is going to increase by 40% from 2023, but yet you go in and look at very particular population, 30% increases in the population of children, 39% in the increases for the working age population. And then really what's going to grow is actually how the senior population is going to grow by 55%, and how that society might look like into the future. And so from that perspective, it's then going into how that looks like in terms of the components of that age, because of that, how basically in 2001, 20% of the population was under the age of 19. Now it's about 16%, but yet moving forward, it's going to be about 18, sorry, I missed my notes here, 15% covered by the working age population, and then really going in towards seniors, and how that population might look like. And I think it's important to note that the flip, if you will, in terms of Burnaby having more seniors than children actually occurred in 2021. That past 2021, there by percentage are more seniors than there are people under the age of 18 in Burnaby. And that's really something that is happening across any number of municipalities in the region. And my slide, but I think that I'll pass the panel to our fellow panelists, but I do have some other slides to kind of talk about, but we'll just kind of keep this panel going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate your patience with the tech issues, but I really appreciated how you both showed us the historic foundations that actually set up our future, and so I really appreciate you sharing that. Graham, I might pass it over to you now if you're okay.
Sure thing. Should I say? Yeah, okay. Thanks so much, Andy. Thanks for inviting me today to speak to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and see a full room of people interested in the future of their community and their city. My name is Graham Cavanaugh. I'm a senior planner on the new mobility team at TransLink. It's within strategic planning and policy. My background is urban planning. I'm originally from New York, and I moved here about 5 years ago. So I was asked to think about top 3 big ideas for the future of Burnaby. I was thinking my headliners would probably be urban design, new mobility or future of transportation, and digital transformation or digitalization. That's the most wonky, techie of the 3. So the first one, I think, is a good follow-up to Andy's talk about population growth and how do we accommodate all these new Burnaby buddies that are going to move into our municipality. So there's a few authors that I love, Andres Dewaney, Jan Gell. These are other urban planners who talk about smart growth and new urbanism approaches to urban design. So this is essentially like mixed-use, compact communities. So imagine your favorite place you've ever been while I'm talking. What does that look like? Are there shops on the ground floor? Are there offices or residential units above those buildings? How tall are these buildings? Maybe 4 or 5 stories? Are they towers? Are they single-family homes? What does the street look like? Are there trees? Are there places to sit? Is there lighting? Are there public spaces where you can gather and meet your friends and your neighbors? So I really want to emphasize the importance of good quality urban design and thinking about being really creative and visionary and imaginative of what that could look like. Okay, so new mobility, transportation. Currently, I think most people drive to get around. Single occupancy vehicle use leads to congestion, traffic, GHG emissions. That's a big one that was mentioned earlier today. We have our climate action strategies. We want to improve air quality, also road safety. And it's an equity issue as well. Not everyone can afford a car, right? So we want to create these compact, walkable communities where you can maybe ride a bike. Maybe it's in bike share, like Moby in Vancouver, these Lime or Neuron scooters that you're seeing popping up different places. Who knows what it will be in 30 years? Probably like unicycles that drive themselves autonomously, who knows? But these actually can serve a great first last mile connection to transit hubs like a TransLink station or a bus station. Currently, TransLink has a bus rapid transit corridor that's planned for Metrotown to North Shore. So this is a great investment in public transit, rapid transit that can move a ton of people and really reduce traffic off the roads. What I would encourage for the municipality is to really support that project by allowing for a dedicated lane. You can do things like transit signal priority, queue jumps. This is getting a bit technical, but anyway, I hope you support public transit so people have more options to getting around other than driving. And it will improve traffic as well, honestly, if you do drive. And in the future, hopefully those vehicles are electric. They might also be autonomous. This is getting into the tech stuff. Maybe anyone's seen headlines like in San Francisco. They've already got these crazy Google Waymo robo-taxis flying around. One of the company's crews, they were pulled off the streets because they're not up to snuff yet. They had too many crashes. But Google's got all the data, so they have the best, software in the back end that can operate these things with their LiDAR sensors and, all that. Workforce development, I think Paul is going to touch on that, but with automation, we do need to be really sensitive to unions and to maintaining good jobs or creating new jobs and having workforce development that ensures that people, have quality work for themselves, while we can also improve road safety and efficiencies in the transit system. Third topic, digitalization, digital transformation. So everything is about data these days. Probably almost everyone in this room has a smartphone in their pocket. It's got apps, it's got social media, it's got, all this information about all of us. Most of the time it's anonymized, it's aggregated, so it's not, Graham is riding his bike from Commercial Drive to Burnaby or something like that. But it does have the origin and the destination. And all of this together gives a huge picture of how people move throughout the region. And this all gets into topics of like Internet of Things or connected infrastructure. So say the bus can talk to the intersection signal and get priority, or the fire truck, or the police vehicle if it needs to. In Copenhagen, Denmark, they have something called the green wave, and it's these little green lights that go along the bike lane. And as you ride, if you ride at the same speed of these little green lights, you get all green lights at the intersections. They prioritize the cyclists. Amazing, right? So how can we use digital technology to improve our quality of lives? Not because it's a shiny new toy and because Google says it's good for us. I will never buy one of those like ski goggles where you see emails constantly. I have no interest in that. But there are benefits to be had with engaging new tech and business models to improve quality of life. So those are my top three: urban design, transportation, digital stuff. Happy to take any follow-up questions on any of those things. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Graham. I think I love the kinds of examples you were pulling in, but also like some of the nuances around this. There's things that we don't consider, and some of these ideas are really flashy and exciting, but there's sometimes some consequences that we don't often think about. So I appreciate you sharing that. Paul, would you like to share your three big ideas?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I'm Paul Holden. I'm the president and CEO of the Burnaby Board of Trade, which is both the Chamber of Commerce for the city of Burnaby with about 1,100 members, but we're also the Economic Development Office for the city of Burnaby. The city has outsourced that role to us for the last 25 years, and it's unusual to have a relationship like that with any municipality in the province, I think, where the city outsources its economic development work to a different organisation, which in this case is us. By the way, getting back to what you call people from Burnaby, Mayor Hurley and Councillor Joe Cleekly wrote a song called Burnabarians. So I think that makes it official that it's Burnabarians if you come from here. So I just want to talk about a couple of things. Just to give you a little bit of context about the business community in Burnaby. It's our role to help support the business community, but we do it in a much kind of broader perspective than I think some people may be aware. Our view very much is that the health and prosperity and resilience and vibrancy of a business community and of the community in which it's based are really inextricably linked to each other. You can't have one without the other. You need both to be successful. You need that healthy community. Otherwise, people don't want to set up business there. They don't want to come and work there. And similarly, you need the healthy business community because there's a tax base attached to it. There's the people getting good paying jobs, and the whole everybody benefits. It's the whole rising tide lifts all boats kind of concept. So we very much, all the work that we do is geared very much to looking at how we can provide those links between a healthy business community and a healthy community at large. To give you some context on a couple of the industries that are really big here, and I think when the city is looking to plan going forward as to how it might structure itself with a view to accommodating what will also be a growing, increasing number of businesses and jobs here. You may or may not know the film industry. People refer to Hollywood North. Well, Burnaby's got 70% of the province's studio space. So it's a massive industry here. It's one that we have to protect and support and look at what we can do to help it grow, because those are really good paying jobs. It's an industry that puts Burnaby on the map in many ways. So that's one industry which is hugely important to the city, and one which needs to be considered when planning. Clean energy. One of the provincial ministers recently referred to Burnaby as the Silicon Valley of the clean energy sector. And I attend most of the ribbon cuttings that go on when businesses come here. And over the last couple of years, it's just been remarkable, the number of clean energy businesses that are here. And obviously, by definition, the jobs in the clean energy sector are clean jobs. They're well-paying jobs. And once you start to get some leading businesses based here, they act very much as a magnet for other businesses to come and base themselves here. And I'll come into that in a second. But clean energy, massive sector for us here in Burnaby. And life sciences, we've got a couple of the largest life sciences companies in the country based here in Burnaby. And again, another sector there which is high-paying, well-paid and clean jobs going forwards. Something to consider, and I'll come back on a bit of that in a sec, but one of the things to consider, obviously, work has changed, and prior to COVID, you'd be hard pressed to find too many people who are working from home all the time. There were some in certain sectors who were. COVID changed it all, and during that period of time, a lot of people started to do it, and now there's a lot of people still doing it, and so there is still a massive requirement for office space, and in Burnaby we have a lot of it, and there's not many vacancies here for office lease and rental. But it's all getting a bit different. A lot of people now, if a company before had 1,000 offices or 1,000 workstations for people, nowadays that might be reducing to 800. But then somebody else is going to come in and essentially replace those 200 seats with other people. So the office space requirement is changing, and there's a lot of uncertainty about it. Nobody really knows how it's going to look going forward, but it is changing. But I think where Burnaby has positioned itself well, and this is something that I think should always be encouraged going forward, is the strategy of developing around transit, which Burnaby really did play very much a leadership role in the last few years or decades. And I think that applies now. We want to make sure that if people want to live, you look at, for example, at the Brentwood area, great opportunities are there for people to live and work in the same kind of area. So I think looking at developments, that's a trend I think that should continue. But one thing I think we've got to consider as well is if you look along Kingsway, for example, and there's other areas of Burnaby like this, there's a huge need for that light industrial workspace. And much as there might be a temptation to kind of knock it all down and build apartment blocks there, there are ways that things can be integrated, that you can protect that industrial space while still addressing the residential needs. And I think that's something, as the official community planning work is done, it's important to consider we can't afford to lose the industrial land space that we have, but it just might look a little bit different as things go forward. And I'll just touch on transportation as you're here. Burnaby's very well served, I think, and obviously we have 2 SkyTrain lines. For those people that still drive, we have 2 major thoroughfares that people can drive on. North to south has always been a bit more of a challenge in Burnaby, but I know that there are some things addressing now. We were talking earlier about the rapid bus route that might be looking to come in, but certainly I think really integrating the work that you referenced, Graham, on making sure that people can get around in multiple different fashions, not just driving around, but multiple different ways they can get to their jobs, get to where they need to be, is something that I think Burnaby has made a tremendous start in doing, and would very much encourage that continues. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And I really appreciate you sharing the breadths of the kinds of industries. I think, we talk a lot about jobs, but never dive deeper into what kinds of jobs are coming to Burnaby or exist in Burnaby. So I appreciate you mapping that out for the assembly. Last but not least, and someone familiar face, Erica, I'm wondering if you want to share your 3 big ideas.
Sure. So my 3 big ideas are thinking in systems or circularity, work with the landscape, and connections are everything. So the first one, thinking about where we're going in the future, we have a lot of opportunities that are the flip side of maybe some of the challenges that we see on the horizon. So when I was talking earlier about some of those ways to retrofit our buildings so that we have lower greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, those are also opportunities to improve our energy efficiency. So we're reducing energy at the same time, and they're that opportunity to introduce things like cooling in the face of heat domes and increasing heat waves. But on the other side of that, or that's kind of a singular example, what I would say is also thinking about how moving from kind of a take, make, waste ecosystem or economy to this circular economy. And I think that there's lots of opportunities and examples, whether it's in the film industry and thinking about reusing film sets and how that can reduce our consumption overall, to how I think there's some examples of a few different industries, and this is where I'm regretting that I don't know the business names, that are co-located where in Burnaby, where the output of one is an input for the next building, for the next business. I really wish that I had that example better on the top of my head. So the second one, my second big idea is work with the landscape, or where we put things matters. And I think that looking at Burnaby, and as Paul alluded to already, the official community plan from many decades ago really set forth this direction of having nodes, having community centers that enabled this network of robust public transit. And so that now, as we think forward into 25 years, where we put things and where we want to concentrate our growth can have a big opportunity. And I say that also not only for where are we putting our growth, but where are we also choosing not to put our growth. We have a huge, the Burnaby Conservation Area in the north east corner of Burnaby is an amazing ecosystem. It's a huge source of canopy cover. The city of Burnaby has one of the highest levels of canopy cover in the Metro Vancouver region at 32%, because we've chosen to preserve these things. We also have 90 uncovered streams. In a lot of other urban areas, those have been piped. We have salmon returning to Stony Creek and Eagle Creek. So these are salmon-bearing streams right in an urban space. So choosing where we do and don't put those pieces can help us to have those robust ecosystems, which will also support us going forward. So the reason why I'm banging on about canopy cover is it's our cooling function. It also manages our stormwater and makes it so that it's less likely we'd have overland flooding, or that it can help us so that we don't have as much flooding in the Still Creek area. So these systems are all connected. And then the final piece is connections are everything. So this kind of builds on Graham's idea of complete communities. And the reason I want to mention this one is because as we're envisioning those future communities and where and how we put in growth, it's also an opportunity for us to build resilience in our communities, but also that's a cornerstone of climate resilience. So early work on this idea of social infrastructure came out of a research on the 1994 Chicago heat dome. And when the researcher there, Kleinenberg, held everything steady in terms of what we were talking about earlier in terms of adaptive capacity. So maybe the amount of disposable income you have on hand, or maybe some of your sensitivities to, like your pre-existing conditions that might make you more sensitive to a heat dome. When he took out all of that stuff, what he found was the people who had better connections in their communities, who knew that they could probably go down to the corner store and it had air conditioning, and it would be okay if they sat there for a while and cooled off, or the ones who had neighbors or family members or chosen family members who checked on them. Those are the people those are the communities that were more likely to have better outcomes in what was a very tragic heat wave in Chicago in 1994. So as we're thinking about the communities that we want to build, it's the physical building, but it's also the personal building. And I think that that's also particularly important because that's where we have creativity, and that's also where none of this is going to happen in one fell swoop, and it will require, this is a marathon, not a sprint when I'm thinking about climate change. So being able to have other people to lean on as we go at this day after day is going to be pretty important.
Thank you so much. I'll take the microphone on that side. I might work my way back for the questions if that's okay. I can take about 10 minutes because I want to dive in a little bit on each of the things that you folks shared. And specifically, earlier this morning we talked a little bit about the OCP that it will touch on a huge number of issues, and you folks have kind of laid out all the kinds of issues, and there are many more that the OCP will touch on. And we can, through the assembly process, what we've tried to do is distill them into these 5 key themes: growth, livability, housing, climate change, transportation. But ultimately, we know, and it's a way for us to make this it's easier, but we know that these issues are all interconnected, and you folks have all kind of highlighted that a little bit. Erica, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit to me, to the group, about these ideas you shared, circular economy and the co-location, where we're choosing to put our density, how these things are both climate choices, to bring us closer to net zero, but also choices that will bring us to a greater sense of livability, if you think that's the case.
Sure. And I think that actually our other panelists have really touched on that already. So when Graham was talking about this idea of compact communities, and Paul was talking about our transportation system, if we have that density that can support strong public transportation networks or more rapid buses. I'm not making promises for TransLink, just to be very clear. But those, we need to have a combination of the people that will use our transportation networks, or the people who will have the businesses, so that we have everything we need within close proximity to be able to build those stronger communities. And I think, so I talked a little bit about this idea of connection, and the idea of social infrastructure, or places where you don't have to spend money, but you'll interact with people. So if you think about our libraries or public spaces that are truly public, where we might run into people and we can have conversations, or even on the bus, even on the SkyTrain, where we can have these conversations and start to see one another as other human beings. That social infrastructure and the communities that encourage us to run into one another can support the development of stronger connections.
Great, thank you so much, Erica. Paul, I might. You touched on this a little bit around the kinds of infrastructure that needs to be in place to support industry, and especially as we're thinking about the OCP, like industrial workspace, these kinds of things. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What kinds of infrastructure needs to be in place to support growing industry, but also a growing workforce?
Well, there's a few things, and I think in terms of a growing workforce, one of the key aspects there is the area of workforce development, which was the phrase was touched on a couple of times earlier. You talk to almost every employer at the moment, and the concern is, where do we find them? Where do we find staff? But there's a bit of a disconnect, because we also speak with people who help newcomers to Canada get themselves settled, who help people with disabilities, who help people returning to the workforce from other circumstances. And they're saying, well, the people that we're trying to help can't find jobs. So there's a bit of a disconnect. And I think something that we as an organisation, we recently launched a division called Burnaby Works, which is the first of its kind in Canada in our kind of sector. And it's really working with the post-secondaries, with the school districts, with the organisations that support people. And as part of all of that, and working with the city of Burnaby, and as part of all of that, we're really looking to see what is needed, what can we do as an organisation, what can the city do to really kind of construct the place in a way that gives everybody a chance to join the workforce and play an active role in it if they want to. So I think from the human infrastructure aspect, that's the key thing that we're working on. The other one, I think it just goes back to what we've said earlier, which is making sure that people can get to and from, those people that are working in a workplace can get to and from there easily, sustainably, and in an accessible format. So I think that's something that's needed. But again, infrastructure, if you look down in South Burnaby at the Big Bend area, that's a tremendous example of a business park which is getting increasingly well served through TransLink as well in terms of bus routes down there. That's a business park that really is acting as a hub for big businesses to come here. And so more of that kind of development, I think, is key as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Grant, for you, I'm wondering, I'm thinking a lot about the last idea that you shared around digitization. Can you talk a little bit about how digitization could affect equity in the city, one way or the other, and share a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. As everyone was speaking, I feel like there's so many good ideas. We've covered a lot. I agree. I really appreciate the comment earlier about engaging with Indigenous nations and the potential for considering reconciliation measures or land back. I was really excited to read the headline in Vancouver about the Sonic development, which is tremendous and is going to provide I don't know how many tens of thousands of housing units. So amazing example there. Digital transformation, you're right, it's an equity issue as well. There's a lot of people who don't have smartphones. I made kind of a joke earlier, I bet everyone here has one, but some people don't. Some people are unbanked. Some people use cash or food stamps or on government assistance. Public transit, in my mind, one of the reasons I became interested in it is because it is an equitable form of getting people from where they live to job opportunities. And it can be a social vehicle, literally and figuratively as well. I find people, maybe you don't want to talk to everyone you sit next to on the bus, that's fine. But it is a way that you can feel part of a community or part of society rather than being, physically isolated in a single occupancy vehicle. I have a brother who lives in Los Angeles. I think it does something, social isolation. I think loneliness is an epidemic that takes place, not just in LA, in lots of places. And I think driving is one of the factors in that. I hope that answers the digital and equity divide. But I would say, let's, with any new technology or business model, let's test, let's evaluate, let's have KPIs, key performance indicators. Let's measure success and what does success look like. But let's not be too hasty with introducing anything new just because it's new.
Great. Thank you so much, Graham. And Andy, I did have a specific question for you, but I'm actually going to give you this chance to do your last two slides.
Well, thank you so much.
I can get our AV folks to line up Andy's last two slides.
And I think just kind of just setting things up, I think if you came down to three ideas I see in terms of both challenges and solutions, I think for me, it's actually how it all comes down to a world that is increasingly hot, uneven, and connected. And I think that in the ideas of being hot, uneven, and connected, that I think that they frame up both the challenges and the opportunities that are in front of us. I just quickly go through this very quickly, and I guess I'll. Oh, wow, that's me. Okay, we were on a track here, and then we're back here. Okay, there we go. Quickly go through this. You kind of just end or begin with really, I think, this idea that I think it's important to kind of begin to understand how within this population change, there are, I think, still some, existing challenges, and part of them certainly comes in housing affordability. When we talk about the city of Burnaby, it's fundamentally how, when it comes to talking about households and core housing need, it bounces around 20%. That I think there were some slight changes, but some of it could be accounted in terms of measurement. That I think that it's important to understand the kind of ongoing challenges when it comes to housing affordability, how it isn't just only about overall households, but the differences between renters and owners in a place like the city of Burnaby. And when you look at actual, not only these percentages, and also be critical of your numbers, that when you look at these percentages, they're also in terms of raw numbers from 2006 to 2021. You actually see the actual raw numbers in terms of an increase of almost 26% in terms of the raw numbers of households who are in core housing need. And I think that it's from this, it's also touching upon really, I think, what frames all the challenges in terms of climate action, in terms of affordable housing, economic development, is really how we deal with climate action. And in that, there's a very serious element, which very much includes the city of Burnaby, and goes into the very real effect of heat deaths. That what you'll see actually, it's how there are different, I think, concentrations of where heat deaths occur in the heat dome. You actually find that down in southern Burnaby, it was one of the, along with New Westminster, it was one of the clusters of heat deaths in Burnaby, along with Surrey City Centre, out over in
Abbotsford and Langley and Chilliwack. And I think that really puts a realness towards the effect of where heat deaths occur. When we focus on the city of Burnaby, it goes into where it was concentrated. There are, I think, perhaps opportunities for future research in terms of who these people are, specifically what type of housing people were living in, and their own kind of social characteristics. And I think that this is, a moment to kind of begin to understand really what I think was is perhaps, unfortunately, the beginning of a number of events in terms of the effects of climate action, of climate change. And I think that it's really taking this rather, really serious aspect of really, the forces that are changing not only Burnaby but the world. I think you focus on perhaps what brings you today here, which is, how you ensure that Burnaby and Holden don't end up to be two separate destinations. Thank you.
Thank you so much for our panel. This was incredible. I want to make some space for questions from you folks. So I might ask Robin to help me with the mic. We might have, 6 or 7 minutes. So I might say 2 or 3 questions if possible. You can direct them towards any of the panelists, or you want everyone to respond. Yeah.
Well, I have 2 questions. My first question is to Graham. You mentioned that there was a plan for rapid bus between Metrotown and the North Shore, but what about the middle of Burnaby? So sometimes I do feel that probably the Willingdon Avenue, like being BCIT, connecting to Brentwood and Metrotown would be a really good idea. But is there any plans for more major rapid bus systems inside Burnaby, not really trying to connect with North Shore or Vancouver, but mostly to interconnect Burnaby?
Yeah, great question. So this is like the system planning team. It's my colleagues who would have a better answer for you. I know that whenever they do their analysis, it's always kind of there's so much funding for this pie, and it gets really divided up amongst the whole region. So you have mayors kind of fighting over, hey, we want SkyTrain, we want rapid bus. But I think BCIT is a really good example because you have a huge student base who probably don't own cars or can't afford cars. And I agree it would be excellent to have one more north-south connection there. My advice would be write your mayor, write your city councilors, and tell them to push TransLink to invest more in those areas, and tell them what you want to see for future transportation.
Thank you. And sorry, my second question is for Paul. You mentioned that we want to keep more of the industrial lands. And I do believe that this assembly, we kind of been putting industrial in our backside. So what would be a good area that you think that we must preserve as industrial, like being heavy or light industry?
A lot of, I think you touched on this earlier, Erin, there are certain things that the city has in some respects limited authority over, and I think with industrial lands, a lot of it is guided by the Metro Vancouver regional plans. So there's an element there of oversight that the region has, and the city can do bits with it, but I think it would be difficult for the city to change the makeup of how much industrial land it has without something happening at the metro level. I think, in honesty, when I look at how Burnaby is structured right now, I think it works pretty well right now. I think having the more warehouse or heavier industry, predominantly either in South Burnaby or in one or two parks in North Burnaby, I think it works well there. As long as, and it has happened increasingly, as long as there's access, connectivity through the transit network. But I think it's going to be more a question of keeping that land base, but maybe working a bit more creatively with it as needs develop going forward. But the amount of it that we have right now, I think, is good. We could always do it more, but creative usage probably the best thing.
Great.
I have lots of questions for you guys, but I'll limit myself to one. This probably applies to at least a handful of you guys. I was wondering if you had any opinions or thoughts about a change in the tax tax system from a property value base to a land value base.
So, well, I'll make one comment on that. There's something which you're possibly aware of is the highest and best use is the phrase that comes from how property taxes is allocated. So if you see like a strip mall somewhere and you know it's been zoned for high-rise development, the businesses that are in that strip mall are now paying property tax on the area above their office or their shop. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment with municipalities and with the province on looking at how some of that can be addressed, because there's an element of fairness which is not necessarily happening. But I don't know if everybody else has any other thought. Andy? Okay, no one's going to talk about it.
Any other questions? I got someone up here.
I have questions about transportation. Obviously, putting in better crosswalks, better lighting, all of that costs money. I heard a rumor years ago that they were looking at putting in like possibly time zone tolls on high traffic areas, so that if you're driving if you drive through Lougheed and Willingdon at 5 o'clock, you're going to get hit with a bill at the end of the month. Is that something that is in works?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is called congestion pricing or road usage fee. It can be like cordon based, which is you draw like a circle on a map and say when you cross this line, you get tolled, and it takes a picture of your license plate. Or it can be distance based, which is more like GPS or something like that. Singapore has this. New York's been trying to do this for years. It's really political. Like a lot of mayors don't want to stick their neck out in line because they're afraid all of you will say, "Hey, don't tax me, on my trip." But it can be an equitable way to generate revenue to fund things like public transportation or bike lanes or what have you for people who don't drive cars. Yeah, some places even do like odd even number license plates. You can drive super fast. There's lots of different iterations of this, but it's politically tricky.
Where we talk about it?
Yeah, it's a metro issue.
I think that there was what they used to call the Royal Task Force, or a task force that was sent to kind of explore the idea of congestion pricing. And I think that it's certainly one that's talked about, but then I think the kind of profound political challenges I think are there. But I mean, for me, I am also aware of the equity issues. There are equity issues because there are particular jobs that are located in places where automobile use or another is not. It's not transit doesn't work. So there has to be this kind of back and forth. I think the level 5 full policy is really important, because in one way to kind of run into a solution and not to think about unintended consequences as per the land value tax is to just be aware that you want to test this out, you want to kind of come in and remind you that there's a certain urgency in terms of climate action, in terms of transportation, but yet also be aware that you can have a lot of unintended consequences.
Great. Well, thank you folks so much. And I just want to thank all of our great panelists for an incredible session. So we can give them a great round of applause.